Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Restaurant Owner Lessons. I'm here with Jordy Murphy. And Jordy, thanks for coming on the show. Do appreciate it. Thank you for making some time for us.
My pleasure, Tony. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And his company is FobeSoft. And where are you recording?
From Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. It's right south of Jacksonville, north of St. Augustine on the coast. I
Cool.
grew up here, spent many years in the Bay Area in San Francisco where I owned and operated restaurants, and got married. Decided my wife wanted to raise our kids here where I grew up because it's a really cool place to raise kids. And
That's good.
so we moved back here 25 years ago. I sold my restaurants, moved back here. Yeah, that's
So you made it out alive.
Yeah, I did. I was there when it was fun, though. I mean, when it was, the early 80s into the 90s.
I feel like that was a good era for restaurants, definitely. Tell us about the kind of restaurants you had and what got you into a little bit about what got you into the business and how you grew it.
Well, the restaurant business I started when I was out of high school, going to college, worked in a French restaurant, tableside cooking, came back to get my summer job, went to see the guy that I had worked for, and he was working for Club Corp at the time. So I went downtown to the River Club. He said, we can't hire for the summer, but would you move to Hawaii and help these people open a restaurant? So it was my junior year in college.
Terrible. Sounds terrible.
Well, being a surfer growing up in Florida, it was like, let me think. I can surf the North Shore all morning, and then I can go work in the restaurant at night.
Yeah.
Realized I had to finish college to move any further, so went back to school in Colorado, finished, and then I ran a country club for Club Corp out of Texas called Canyon Creek Country Club in Richardson, Texas. From there, I moved to Aspen and opened a restaurant for a guy called the Smuggler Land Office. It was funny because I was talking to a bartender, and I said, Don, when did you move to Aspen? He said, I came here for a winter 17 years ago.
There you go.
Where I was out of there.
There you go.
I was in San Francisco in 83, 84. I went to work for Kimpton, and I took over Coletto's, annualized at less than $2 million, losing a couple $100,000 a year. And within 3 years, I had it doing a little less than $8 million, making 24% profit.
That's amazing. All right, so I want to pause you right there. I know there's a million things you did, I'm sure. I've been in the corporate game, I've been in owning my own restaurant game. We're small operators, but what were some of the things you did to turn it around? Because that's a big turnaround.
Huge turnaround.
Go from losing 200,000 or 300,000, I think you said, and then up to, what were some of the things you did?
Well, what I learned in Texas, a company called Studebakers of America, was I opened a bunch of Studebakers, one for Walter Payton in Chicago, which was fun. But I learned at that point how to do a daily profit and loss statement. Rudimentary, with a calculator. So what did you spend in labor? What were your sales? And what did you spend, invoice-wise? And so what I did is I adopted that strategy at Coletto's, and I divided it into departments. So I had the chef that was, doing the labor, scheduling labor in the kitchen and whatever his purchases were in the kitchen. I made a person in charge of the front of the house. They did all the scheduling for the labor in the front of the house. And I had a bar manager. So what we would do is we'd sit down once a week, every Monday, and we would go through it. I mean, I did it with a calculator and a pencil. That's the rudimentary workings of FobeSoft. Because now what we do, it's all imported and EDI connections and all this stuff. So you almost get it automatically, and you compare it to a budget. So if you're either hitting the budgeted number, it's red or green. But back in the day at Coletto's, it would be like, look, on the first Monday, it could be 4 days into it, and I'd be able to say, your front of house labor's, is over right now. So this evening, at the end of the day, let's cut some sections. Let's get some servers out of here. Let's, let one person stay and do the rest of the tables. In the kitchen would be the same type of situation. And what we did is we used the term manage to the bottom line. So what I did is just, and each month, I also did another thing to help increase the sales. And it's an old tactic from Club Corporations of America. Is I started meeting all the people that were coming in. We were downtown Union Square, And like a ton of people from the Chronicle would come in, and I remembered their names. And I tried to use their name 2 or 3 times throughout their stay. And what I did is I created this huge following, or this huge, where these people would, I knew them every day when they would come in for lunch, or they'd call me, personally. I'd get the table that they wanted. And so we grew the business that way. And then I managed to the bottom line with the method of like FobeSoft today. So that's pretty much.
I love that. Absolutely. I want to touch on 2 points you said that I think came to my mind. The last point being what you did was I've heard of a local restaurant group that they would call that holding court, right? People come in, you're like the conductor, I mean it's an age old concept, but I feel like it was an 80s kind of thing that kind of grew out of that restaurant era where it was really like, I mean, it's always good, but I wonder if we've lost some of it now. That's another topic perhaps, but I love what you said. And what I like about what you're talking about and an actionable item is that you're not waiting for 30, 60 days to get a labor number back from somewhere and it's already spent. It's already gone, right?
100%.
It's already so what your soft and this is as I probably prompted in our initial meeting or initial emails. I want to give the people watching this, like myself, that are small operators, maybe they're huge operators, we don't know, but there's actionable tips. So what I gather is you're saying, hey, action, 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 numbers going in right away, and obviously now, like you said, we don't need the pen and the pencil and the jot pad as much, but you can make adjustments right away.
100%. What I did from Coletto's, I built Post Trio with Wolfgang Puck, and I ran that with Wolf for 3 years. Did the same method, but then I was a partner in a group. We had 6 Asian noodle restaurants, and what I did is I run around to each restaurant at the beginning of the month, and I'd load the budget on there. So at the end of the night, all they had to do was enter sales, front of house, back of the house, because we built the salaries in behind, plus the workman's comp, the payroll taxes. So it's a true labor figure. And then they entered whatever invoices they got that day. Now, then they would take that and they'd fax it to my house. So when I got up in the morning, I'd have six of them in front of me, and I was like, "Oh, what did this guy do yesterday? He spent, $300 on cases of to-go cups or what have you." And that's where I would start my day. So it's, because as you know, the restaurant business notoriously has been a rear view mirror business. People operate for a month, they turn around, and hopefully they've got a decent bookkeeper, not someone that's calculating their cost of goods off total sales. But, they turn around and say, did we make money last month? And they're already, days into the next month. So
halfway into it, usually, at least.
They've already got, if they had an issue, that issue's compounded into the next month. We're giving them the actionable information to make decisions and manage to the bottom line. And what we recently instituted was, in fact, I got one right here the other day because I run a couple of restaurants on it, where the 7th of the month and 21st of the month, we shoot them an alert that says, here's where you spent all your money so far. This is what your labor's running. This is your sales compared to your budget. And this is all the invoices that you spent. Because we import from the point of sale system. We have EDI connections with Cisco, US Foods, all the big broadliners. So the invoice comes automatically in. We built a piece of AI that reads the invoice and parses it to the cell. That's 97% accurate. And then if they get, say, an invoice from a fish guy, from their distributor, you can write 10 pounds of ahi on a napkin times $12 a pound, take a picture of it with your phone, goes to the cloud, parses to the cell, and boom, boom. So you're basically getting this information without having to touch a thing. Where we'll run into maybe some issues is someone might not be aggressive enough to take the pictures of their invoices, and that's it. As long as you
right,
look at
that's the stopgap.
When we've pretty much handled it because we do all the work and the EDI connections help so much, with Cisco and the big broadliners. But everybody has other vendors that they use that, the little invoice here and there. But, it's pretty cool. We had a guy tell us last week, you not only increase the profit of my restaurant, you've turned my manager into an operator. And now that was really cool to hear.
That's a great point. That's a great point. So much to chew on. So at the end of the day, literally at the end of the day or the week, you're able to basically produce a P&L that's maybe not encompassing of everything that's coming up, but obviously everything's been spent. And if it's a recurring monthly bill, do you build that in as an automatic kind of?
Yeah, it's not. It's like 95% customizable.
Uh,
We can build in behind this the platform. You know, like for instance, we put rent in there, but we put your monthly rent in there, so a piece of it goes parcels to the cell every single day.
right.
You know, same with
You're spending it every day, really.
yeah, your liability insurance. So when you're
Right.
looking at your bottom line and it's 10 or 12 or whatever percent profit, hopefully that's continuing because the rent's growing as the sales are moving in because it's going
Right.
up.
So it's not, oh, I forgot to put in that $4,500 of rent that comes on the first or
Exactly.
the third
We've
or the
done all
fifth.
that for them, and we've
Got it.
helped. We've helped. We have, with our support team, we do a review, and we go through what they're spending. And it's we what we do is we take little bites. You have your sales, and then we have your cost of goods section, your labor section, your controllables or your variable expenses, and then your non-controllables or your fixed expenses. So what we do is we say, if anybody, if you're sitting here, if you really busted it, you say, I can find a point in my cost of goods, right? And then you get in there and you go, I can find a point in my labor. And you can find at least a point in your controllables. And you can find a point in your non-controllables. So if you're making 10% profit and you've gone through this exercise, now you're making 4 more points. You're making 14% profit.
Which is 40%
Forty
more.
percent increase.
Doesn't sound as much when it's 4%, but when you really look at it, yeah,
I mean, it's huge. It's massive.
it is. That
When
is.
people, a lot of, and I get it because I was in the four walls for years myself. And you run around, it's like, what do I do? And you have, like, we had a client they did $1.5 million in sales, and they have one category, supplies, $360,000.
Eesh.
Now, how are you going to find anything in there? What we did, this one was like, he was all into it. We immediately cut $100,000 off the supplies, broke them all out, gave him a budget, and he started hitting the budget. We increased his profit 100 grand. We did it with a lady in Atlanta. Her comment was, "How do you spend nine advertising?" She was in her restaurant did like almost $3 million. She's like, "Well, I just have a hard time saying no." And all these people tell me that they're going to get all these people in here. Well, we immediately whacked it like 30 grand.
You'll advertise yourself to death.
Right. Well, but the thing is when you whack 30 grand, sales didn't change a bit. Oh my
Right.
God. So it's really not doing anything for you.
Right.
And
Right.
that's
Right.
what
Right.
we do. But when you get caught in the four walls, like I was, I get it. You don't, you're looking at big expenses, like, and that's hard.
Yeah, I feel like it's that example where you look at something and you're this close to it and you don't see it, right? You can see this is some kind of, foot
Exactly.
massage ball, but if it's here, it looks like the world, right? That's my quick analogy. But I love I love the way you're describing because you know what? I think obviously knowing your story, you've been through it, you've done it, you've operated, you've got your hands cut and fit and sweat and all that. You've also obviously come out on the other end, you've sold it, you've sold your businesses and come up with this solution, and it resonates with me because I feel like a lot of people that approach the restaurant industry are not restaurant people, as I would call them, and there's a real disconnect. Sometimes in reality, sometimes just in perception. But I think you've obviously been made a success because people, as I am, feel like you actually know what you're talking about because you actually did it, and that's what I like. I think what you're talking about is great. So let's go on a little bit of a side note here. Obviously with us being both old enough to have been in the restaurant game for quite a while and done different stuff and been where it was a pad and a paper and that's all you had, you've got different platforms doing similar things. I see that what you're doing, it seems to me, if I'm being sold on it, is it's a actionable, short time span to make adjustments in your spending, in your budgeting, in what you're doing, comparing it to some of the other platforms that are out there that do invoicing and do different things. What's the differentiator in FobeSoft that?
We
Maybe I
are
just need
giving
to
you
do it.
a full profit and loss statement every day. We're not just giving you your cogs. We're not just giving you your labor. Nope, there's already platforms out there that deal with your other expenses, your controllables, etc. And I don't think there's any platform out there that gives you a budget that runs month to date. So you have to have a baseline. Otherwise, you're just looking at a number, going, "Oh, okay, I think it's okay."
Right.
I mean, if you sit
A
there and you
guessing
say,
game.
I want to do 100 grand this month, and say $3,200 a day or whatever it is, $3,300 a day, and 5 days into it, you're at $12,000. Well, so that means that you're off by 3 or 4 grand. Well, a lot of operators will continue to operate, you know, schedule their labor, buy their products, etc. But the top line isn't there anymore, or isn't
Yes.
what it should be. So all these other expenses have gone up percentage wise. If you wanted to make 10%, all of a sudden
Right.
it's 4 or 5%.
It
Hurt.
disappears quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it opens your eyes to the whole picture. So you
Very
don't get
cool.
blindsided.
So it's really that morning day of walking in the restaurant or at night, whenever. Obviously now we've got computers everywhere, but it's that barometer, that navigation to have you run a better shift that day and say, okay, we thought we were going to do 2 grand yesterday, we did 1,500, or we get whatever the number is. Now let's trim this and trim that, and maybe get that person in an hour or two later to make sure that at the end of the day or the end of the month, the numbers come out to where you're making your money.
100%. And like I said, it's either red or green. So if your sales
Mm.
aren't hitting there, you've
It's like
got
a stock
say
ticker.
your back of the house labor's red, your kitchen supplies are red, your restaurant supplies are red. So you're like, whoa, let's hold off
Time to
on
throw the
spending.
brakes.
You know,
Yeah.
you don't need to buy the extra sheet pans or whatever. Let's get by with what we have. Till this thing turns green.
Well, I feel like what you're doing too, because I worked a little bit for corporate restaurant. I worked 8 years in a couple jobs, I guess, but I've been on my own most of it. But I think what that corporate experience, there is a budget, there is a P&L, there is a sit
Exactly.
down, there is a, hey, why was your labor 13.2 not 13 or
Right.
whatever and sometimes you go, I think it was this, that, and the other thing. But I think what it seems like you're bringing is that corporatized kind of financial control to possibly the independent operator or small units, small
Exactly.
group of.
It's showing them what the guardrails are.
Right.
For instance, like I remember, the corporate situation that people don't, restaurateurs don't understand. They have a manager in there at the end of the night, and the night's over, and they're say having a shift drink. Well, you got 2 or 3 people sitting at the bar that are still on the clock. Everybody's, the guy's closing out or whatever. Those little things add up. Like if you save an hour a day in the front of the house from what you scheduled, and an hour a day in the back of the house from what you scheduled, depending on where you are, you're going to save between probably $15,000 and $18,000 a year. Now that will pay rent, and
Yeah.
for a month or two for a
Yeah.
lot of places.
Exactly. Or
And
more.
what happens is, when the owner's not there, he's been there all day long. He bounces at 8:30, 9, 10 o'clock at night. Well, somebody closes the restaurant, and sometimes you've got people hanging out. And they're not doing it purposely
Maliciously.
or
Yeah.
maliciously. They're tired too. But
Right.
things like that you gotta draw the line. Here's your shift drink. Did as soon as you clock out, I'll give you your shift drink.
Right, right. Bring me the ticket. Right, right, right. Well, it's very spot on because it's like it's kind of like the doors are closed and the rats are eating all the cheese. It's, like you said, it's not their intention necessarily, and they're not there for the through 2, 3, $4 an hour and whatever it is. But stretched out over a month, that surely does add up.
It adds up tremendously.
It adds, and I think again, I want to get to the basics here for those operators, that when you save that $10, it can go right to the bottom line. It
100%.
skips your P&L all the way to the profit level, right? And that's something I learned being in corporate for a little while. It was like, some of this stuff you look at, it's not just sales. I'm very top line oriented, but I'm trying to always be better at being middle and bottom line oriented because that's what actually goes in the bank, right?
Right.
And for those operators that don't even use, I mean, that just wing it, like the contractor, the contractor's truck who has all the invoices stuffed in his glove box. There's operators that and I know,
Right.
and we may be some of that guiltiness, that are just so far away from this level of precision that you're offering, which is wonderful. But they're like, all right, that sounds great, but it sounds like a lot of work. But when you think about that money and that, I always think about the $5 broken plate. You hear the plate crash, you go, oh, it's $5.
Right.
You know, that just costs you. There's no way
Right.
to replace. I mean, yeah, you'll replace it one day and it'll all kind of catch up. But I think it's so important for those watching to go, okay, how do I slice up my day, my week, my month, and my collective bunch of stuff that I've spent money on this month to make sure I'm making money?
Well, the thing
Because
is,
a lot of people do it and don't make a lot of
Tony,
money.
as you know, yeah, I mean, this is a business of pennies. And a lot of people get in this, be it a franchisee, say put some people, they found a great chef that had never really had any financial or never worked corporate world. It doesn't necessarily understand the total P&L. And all of a sudden, you've got a person running a $2.5 or $3 million business that really, and no knock on them, nobody's ever shown
Right.
them.
They just
Nobody's
right.
ever done the, here's what it is.
They don't know what they don't know.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and what we do is, it's very simple. We don't get all, it's not all complicated. It's not all journal entries and all this other stuff. It's not like you even have to learn, we can push everything to QuickBooks, whatever they want for their bookkeeper or whatever. But a lot of situations we found is the bookkeeper that someone might hire is doing manufacturing accounting. So they're doing their cost of goods, like your food cost, off your total sales. We had one just 2 weeks ago, and the guy's like, well, I'm running a 31.5 food cost. And I said, well, off total sales, your reality is you're running a 43.4 food costs off your food sales. And the guy's like,
Food to food, liquor to
the
liquor.
guy's like, what do you mean? And then
Right.
we walk through the exercise. It's like, wow, I need this. Boom.
Yeah, because your 20% beer cost or bar cost or whatever combined is offsetting a whole lot of food waste.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you know what I think? Again, I know we're speaking the same language, I believe, and you're speaking an extra special language. But for those that don't do this, it's the not funnest part of why we get into restaurants, but it's the part that gives you the life to move forward to do the fun parts. Because a lot of it sucks. Let's be honest. A lot of running restaurants is tough.
It's hard.
Schedules, people, customers, blah blah blah. We all know the story. But to me, I'm kidding from your stories. Like, hey, do this little bit of work. I'm thinking about that guy who's like, I don't have time for this. I'm busy cutting steaks and cutting fish and blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, like to do the passionate part of what you're doing, having the financial control lets you do it longer.
It lets you, I was say the exact same thing. It lets you do it. It affords you the ability to continue to do it,
Yeah,
and to not worry about it. I mean,
right.
if you're not operating with this stuff, and it really, the reality is 5 or 10 minutes a day is all that it takes. Because
That's
we've
phenomenal.
done the work for you.
Right.
We do most of it. Excuse
So
me.
it's really because it's drawing in sales. Like if we use Toast, it's drawing in all your sales and your different categories. As long as all that information is coming in, once it's streamlined, and you might have
Right.
to tweak a thing or two. But
We
what's
hook up the
the
connection with Toast, and we do the labor front of the house, back of the house, and I mean, it's boom, it's all there.
and so if we don't use say we don't use a broadliner, or we do have, like you said, fish suppliers or different ones that don't read automatically, we're scanning a picture, take a picture, send it in.
Yeah. Do you know how when you deposit a check, so you put the phone over the invoice, and you got the little
Yep.
box around it.
Yep.
Boom, you got it. Because initially what we did until we put the little box thing like doing a check, we'd get half the invoice and that would sit there. But now we got it. Boom. I mean, hit the button and it's done. And like I said, it's 97% accurate. I mean, you're not doing your year end or whatever with FobeSoft, although some people do. Some people use it as a bookkeeper. You still have a bookkeeper, and you still we help the accountant. We're getting all this information in there, so and it's organized. But the accountant on the 7th and the 21st can pull up. These are all the invoices we have so far this month. I mean, how many restaurateurs can show you that? Not very many.
Not very many. Yeah. So it's really an internal navigation tool.
Right.
Sounds like.
You know what we say? We keep people organized. We make sure that we everything goes in a box and everything goes like. And here's what you're doing, and these are the reports. Plus, you can pull it up on your phone, and it's gonna it gives you actionable information too, so you can help manage your managers.
Right. 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 And in terms of, let's see, any other questions? In terms of the so you got your monthly expenses, you got your daily purchases. It averages it out. It seems like it's almost like a stock trader, kind of up and down, green and red, like you said. So you can kind of really glance at it in a minute and say, "Wait a minute, why is that red?" Oh, okay. Which is, I think, what people need. Obviously, your
But
service does
you
it.
know what else you can do, Tony? You can sit here and say, it's a Monday, and you can go 7 days ahead and talk to the chef or the kitchen manager, whoever. Go, you got $6,700 to spend this week, which helps your cash
Declining
flow.
budget.
Yeah,
So
which helps
declining.
your cash flow. Or you're scheduling. You're on a Monday. Let's go through Sunday. It's like this is how much you have to spend in the back of the house and the front of the house. It helps people. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, and they don't do a schedule kind of like this, by the seat of their pants, or this is what I think I need. And if you look at your schedule like that, well, maybe you'll decide I don't need to bring four servers in at 4 o'clock to set up. Maybe I bring two of them in at 4 o'clock. Maybe I bring one in at 5 o'clock and another one in at 5:30. Right there, I've saved 5 or 6 hours times, you know,
4 or 5 bucks
however
an
many
hour, whatever
dollars
it
an
is.
hour. I mean,
Yeah.
and then you do the same thing when they leave. This guy came in first, so there's first one to bounce. When it starts slowing down, they take over the tables, and it becomes just it just starts happening. People understand that's the way that it goes. This is I'm the first one in to set up, and I'm the first one to bounce when it starts slowing down. Everybody buys into it. In the management, people want to do well. They want it to be green. If it turns red, it's like, okay, what do I do to get this back to green? So
Mhm.
it's really it's a pretty cool tool.
So if you're, let's say you're at, yeah, I mean, I'm following along. I'm imagining the restaurant, right? Two things that got out of that too is that as a kitchen labor thing, if you're able to project better and say, okay, look, like typically, and now sales trend wise, it says, okay, last Tuesday or a year ago Tuesday, does it get into all that? So
You
you're
can, yeah, or you
scheduling.
can you can go back as you can look at last year, you can look at last Tuesday, you can look at
So you can say traditionally our Tuesday nights are 3,000 bucks of sales. We don't need that extra fry cook or whatever.
Here's an example for you.
Yeah,
We
please.
we have a group of bars, and these guys kill it Thursday, Friday, Saturday. 12, $15,000 nights.
Nice.
And Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, it's $2,000 or $3,000 nights. Well, we pointed out that they were doing the same schedule for bartenders on the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday that they were on the weekend. Saved
Yeah.
them $4,000 twice a month in payroll just by pointing that out. It's crazy some of the stuff that pops up, and it's just from. I mean, like it's a hard business.
It
I mean,
is.
people work a lot of hours, and it's
They
not
were,
easy.
yeah. There's a lot of hours, a lot of stress. I think and I've experienced it. Look, I'm not here on the show to say I'm Mr. Perfect Operator by any means, but I think the shame of it is when you get to the end of your month or your year and you say, "Wow, all that work and we only made whatever." And I think the corporate restaurant won't let that happen because they have monthly P&L meetings. And they have like I always like to break down into like down to earth small operator kind of stuff because we may be the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker.
Right.
And what I think your tool sounds like it does is really great because it's given us a lot more of that corporatized kind of power slash awareness without being necessarily a big corporate restaurant group.
Right. Well, there's a lot of franchisors that don't give their franchisees any of this information. They'll say, here's paint the inside this color. Here's the menu. This is, your kitchen supplies and restaurant supplies that you're supposed to have. Hire a bookkeeper and use QuickBooks. Like
Right,
that. I mean,
right,
where
right.
we can put the, and it handles the fiduciary responsibility to the franchisee. So it's that's it, and it's simple. We made it super simple.
I love it. I love it. How long have you been around with
Well, We really have been around for 3 years now, since the pandemic. Because I had financed this before by myself, and there was still entry and things like that. But right after the pandemic, we got a little angel fund that gave us some money, which gave us the opportunity to build some of the technology to where it is today. Yeah, so 3 years. It's actually
That's
January
awesome.
was 3 years. So, and we've
Well,
got hundreds of
congratulations.
restaurants using it. So,
As a small business owner of any sort, I always give congratulations because we both know how hard it is to
it
run
is hard.
any company. What advice would you give to operators that you've seen over the years? What could they take away from this interview besides your software, which I'd love them to try it? Is there, oh, by the way, is there a trial opportunity, or how do people
Yeah,
find
well,
you?
it's we show them a 30-minute demo to see what they want to do, and then we work something out from there. We did trials for a while, but if people don't have skin in the game, they typically don't use it.
Yeah.
But here's a couple to takeaways. Chef Evan Funky. He
No,
owns
I don't.
he owns Felix in L.A. and he's probably like it's probably like the best pasta restaurant in the
I've heard
country.
of Felix,
And then
actually.
he
Yeah.
has a new concept called Mother Wolf, and he's on the Netflix show, which is, I think, Noodles or whatever, that's out right now. And he was
Okay.
interviewed, and they said, what is the one takeaway, or what happened to you with your first restaurant? They spent $3.5 million, and he was out of business in 6 months. He
Eesh.
said because he had no idea about the finances of a restaurant. And right after that, I mean, and it's on Netflix right now. You can hear the guy say it. And Jose Andres.
Of course.
Jose Andres has 40 restaurants. He was on a podcast 2 months ago. They said, what's the most important thing you can tell a person that wants to get in the restaurant business, or a chef or somebody that's in the restaurant business? He said, before you do anything, understand the financials. And that's it, because it's a business. It's a
Yeah.
fun business. It can be a great business, you know, but it is a business. And we made it simple for people, and no, the other thing is that when someone gets into it, now when I'm going to build a restaurant, I had a client years ago when I used to consult with people, and he was going to spend like $890,000. They were redoing this really old grocery store in El Paso, Texas. And I did a sources and uses of funds for him. And I flew out there and I spent a day with him, and he thought he was spending, $1 million. But once, you had the China Glass and Silver, your point of sale system, the tables, all the other things,
Right.
it was
Right.
another $800,000. Because that's basically what it costs, to do a good sized restaurant. And he looked at it and he said, "You know what? You're the first person that's told me the truth." Because people, you have to have a good idea of everything that goes into it before you jump into and know, and you get that from doing a budget,
Yeah.
and knowing.
What you're reminding me of two things that I feel like there's sometimes some kind of ego thing of the more you spend, the better the restaurant's going to be. And that's so not true. And I like to go in, and not that I'm Mr. 25 locations, but as I've grown over the years and done our things, like I like to go in and go, how fast can we get open? Like every day, like you get in, and I learned this when I was in my 20s, you get into construction mode. You're rebuilding, you're doing this, and it's like the construction guys are coming, and it's getting ready to get started. And it's like, dude, every day you're not open is at least a couple $1,000, maybe $10,000.
Here's the other thing: people say, "Oh, restaurants lose money for the first 6 months to a year." That is the biggest bunch of what you've ever heard. Because here's the thing: when you open, you're going to get a shot at everybody. That's where you can make hay and
New kids on the block, right?
get your finances in control. So you're going to need to know from day one, because that's when a lot of it's going to start flowing in. You can be profitable from day one.
Yep, absolutely. And I think what you're obviously pitching is that financial control, that awareness, and I think just the lack of hype. Like okay, it's going to cost this. Make sure it's going to cost that. Get open, get up and running, get every day, whether it's $50 you made at lunch, or 500 or 5,000. Get those sales coming in, and that's where you start to get the chance to make some
Exactly.
money.
Exactly.
So what's the kind of cost of what your service is? Is it variable based on the restaurant, or is
No,
it is set price?
it's either $209 or $239 a month.
Well, that's very
Yeah,
reasonable.
so it's 209 if we're compatible. We can link in with 12, 14, 16 point of sale systems, but there's some janky ones out there that. So
Of
what we
course.
do is we have someone from the team goes in at night and pulls the information, puts it in so it's in there when you get up in the morning, and
Got it.
that's what we refer to as an entry assistant, and that's an extra $30 a month. Other than that, but it's extremely reasonable, especially for you're going to spend $2,400 a year to probably make 20 or $30,000 minimum extra.
Right.
Kind of
Well,
pays
that's
for
the
itself.
key. That's a very fair a point and a good point because it's return on investment, right? And it's going
Exactly.
to cost whatever it costs a year to run the software and the program. But if it's obviously affecting your bottom line in the right way, you're going to stick with it. And that's what you want. That's what your clients want. Makes sense. Something like a margin edge, or I know we use Mies right now for recipes.
Right.
Can this incorporate kind of all that, or is there some parts that it's better left to those kind of softwares?
Well,
I know
you want to leave.
Margin Edge is probably pretty close, right?
A margin edge does what they do. They're prime cost. We give you the full picture.
Got it.
Those are good products. Ours is just different. We're showing you the whole thing, and I think to an extent, ours in some aspects is more effective.
Got it. No, I am visualizing. I'm going to go watch the demo. Like I said, I don't like to do too much research ahead of time to not taint my questions and answers, but sounds like a really great thing. And I love the visualness that I'm imagining, at least the red and the green, and the kind of like it's
Exactly.
almost like gamifying it to some degree.
To an extent, yeah.
Like you kind of say, hey, all right, well, the red, obviously the reds are my top priorities to worry about.
And I mean, you can wake up in the morning as an operator and look at your phone first thing and see, it's the 14th of the month, and you're like, wow. You can be on the phone at 8 a.m. Go, what happened in the back of the house last night? The labor's crazy,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also keeping yourself in check, because some of again, the people that are going to watch this show are single unit operators, and
Right,
they're the ones doing it.
right,
They're the ones being guilty of letting their cook sit around for a half hour and
right.
chew the fat on the clock or whatever. So
And we help those guys. We help a ton of independent operators. We have one. She started with one restaurant. Now we have all seven of the restaurants.
wow,
We've had that. We had another guy a month ago said, you have changed the way he has five restaurants. You've changed the way I'm operating my restaurants. That's pretty cool to hear. I mean, that's
absolutely,
to me. I mean, I get a chill when I hear that.
that's cool. That's real
Yeah.
cool.
It,
That's real cool. Closing advice. I don't want to take too much more of your time. You've been very gracious. Any closing advice for operators that from
just pay
whatever?
attention to it. Whether you use us, FobeSoft, I mean, it's definitely worth a demo. Whether we close 40% of the demos we do. So I would say do a demo because it's going to open your eyes and you're going to see value. Whether you sign up for it or not, it gives you ideas on what you can do with what you're using. But the advice is the financials. Obviously, Evan Funky, Jose Andreas. I mean, in the corporate world, know your financials, and you're going to become more profitable.
Yeah, and I think obviously that being profitable at one store at one level, one store gets you the chance to be profitable at two and three and four and beyond. Because
Exactly.
I always love to hear when people have grown from one to seven or one to whatever. That's just
And when you
awesome to
have a
hear.
tool like this, like we can line 3 or 4 or 5 restaurants up next to each other. And that I learned years ago from the president of Richard Sandoval's restaurant, super guy, Tim Dillon. He has his own consulting business now. You line them all up and look at them across the board, you're going to find money like that. How's this guy operating like this, and this guy's operating like this, and they're doing the same in sales?
Right. And how do you share those tactics and how do you
Yeah, but
share
we
that?
we have a platform that does it. They go into one URL, 3 restaurants, boom, right where you are on all three of them.
I love it. Well, I will be on a demo shortly.
Awesome.
I appreciate your time. It was really eye-opening conversation. I really
Thank you, and
appreciate
I
it.
really appreciate you having me on. It was a pleasure
Yes,
meeting
sir.
you.
Yes, sir. let's stay in touch. Thanks everybody for watching Restaurant Owner Lessons. I want to thank Jordy for his time, and go check out FobeSoft, FobeSoft.com.
Yes, and
I'll
my
put
email
links.
is geo@fobesoft.com.
That's a cool email. I like that. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.
Awesome, Tony. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So do I.
That was great. I will be. I'm not blowing smoke. I will be checking your software out. It sounds. I didn't know much about it honestly because I like to just kind of approach it fresh, but it sounds great.
So how long have you been doing this?
You're talking about the podcast? Off and on a couple years actually. We've been more on it lately, several years. And I kind of pick and choose. I don't make it a begrudging thing to have a show every week all the time.
Right.
But when people approach me and I get a good feel or a good topic that can give value, I love to jump on and do it.
How many listeners do you have?
Let's see. The last I checked my Spotify numbers, it was like something like 20,000 something downloads in the last. Yeah. So it's growing. It's not huge. It's not magnanimous, but I'm growing it in multiple areas with the video, the audio, and some online content.
Right on.
And for
Man.
me, yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It's pretty amazing that with the simple software like this, or even your phone. I mean, honestly, you can do. Do you do any podcasting or recording or content stuff?
I don't do it myself, no. But I've done just in the last few months, a decent amount of podcasts. I love talking about what we do. I mean, it's a passion of mine. It's always been.
Could be a great topic for a show.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, and I'm always kind of promoting it as an industry. It doesn't. I think people make it if there's interest there, they make it too complicated. Like my setup is nothing crazy. It produces a good quality, show in my opinion. And the most important thing is that it gets information out.
Right.
It gets
And
people
that's the
listening and
key.
talking.
When
Yeah.
people, I mean, we had, I spoke to a guy earlier today, the guy that does our payroll. Over
Huh?
the episodes, I got a guy in the office. He owns 2 restaurants in South Florida. He's like, "Tell me what you do," and I gave him the 30,000-foot view. He goes, 10 o'clock Friday morning. I want a demo.
There you go.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah.
I want to check it out. We need it, honestly, as operators. We need it. We're small. We're a family-run business with two locations.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, and we always can get better at our numbers and better at controlling.
Well, if you'd like, I mean, just shoot me an email, and Matthew, my partner, he can show you a demo in 30 minutes.
Okay.
When you have time, just give me a time slot. I'll hook you up with Matthew, and you'll get a good idea of everything. Because there's a lot more there than you and I just talked about.
Sure.
Really cool stuff.
Well, I think you did a fantastic job of sharing some insights and some strategies because I want people to watch the show and walk away with something they can learn today, whether or not they use your product or not. Obviously, yeah, I would absolutely like that. That'd be great.
Awesome. That'd be awesome.
Cool.
Right on, Tony.
All right, man. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
All right, I'll be in touch once I get this edited and posted. Okay.
You got it. Have a great
All right.
day.
Take care.